Can these two Bittensor subnets cure cancer and find medications that can solve for diseases and understand DNA as we know it? My name is Jeremy, aka School Crypto, and I'm bringing you the first video in months. I am so sorry. I just got a full-time job a few months ago and it's been overwhelming and I haven't been able to make videos or do as many articles as I'd like, but that's an excuse. I'm back. I'm ready to make some more content, and hopefully you watch this and learn a little bit more about these two subnets that I'm really excited about. So the two subnets that I would like to profile in this video is Minos, which is subnet number 107, I believe, and Nova, which is subnet number 68. And these are two very exciting subnets that can really take the medical community by storm. It's been a few years since machine learning has really come to the fold in medical observations and learning about solving for diseases and understanding our DNA. And the first one, Minos, basically tries to understand the DNA through evaluating what you call a genome. And basically you're trying to understand the genetic material that you're made of in order to best identify what sort of diseases that you could possibly have later on in life. So if, let's say, I have certain DNA and there's certain parts of my makeup in which could lead to heart disease, that's exactly what they're looking for with all these genomes. They have mutations, they have certain coded information inside them, and that's going to tell the medical community exactly what's in store for that person, either in the short term, medium term, or long term. So this is really exciting in terms of figuring out what people can do with their lives, what people can take, how they're supposed to live their life, and what they have in store for them in the future. And this is something that is ultimately evaluated with these synthetic simulations. And what Minos does in terms of validating these miners is they come up with a problem and they look for a genome with certain mutations in it, and the miner gets scored by the accuracy of understanding that genome and figuring out the fake mutations within that molecule. And the validator basically uses these known data sets, basically these genomes that have known information about their makeup, and it's ultimately scored by how these are evaluated and how the miner goes about solving these issues. And the whole idea is basically taking the most accurate way of evaluating these genomes, and then that's going to be the method in which identifying genomes that are unknown or unidentified or people don't know as much about it. So it's a really exciting development with Minos, and just the understanding the DNA of human beings would be such a huge breakthrough in determining what type of food that we need to eat, what type of medications that we need to have in order to be healthy for the rest of our lives. So that, for me, it's almost like a really enhanced, 23andMe, basically they tell you, you do a test and you understand your DNA, what type of DNA you have, but this is taking it to another level. This is getting into specifics as to the type of things that you're prone to potentially getting, and just a lot more detailed information of your ultimately your makeup. So that is super exciting, and something that I'm really, really pumped to see what they do, because I watched a novelty search and I forgot what the guy's name was, but this guy was just, super sharp, super smart, very intellectual. It just seemed like a guy that I can trust in terms of doing very very profound work on a daily basis. And so they reward miners every 72 minutes every single day, and that miner gets 90% of the rewards. And I was actually doing a study on how much these miners get in a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, and the top Minos miner earned 794 tau in a whole month. So you know what that means? That's like 160 grand that guy made just from coming up with answers and computations for certain genomes in a DNA strand. So it's just, these guys are just making a ton, and they're doing work that can potentially, save lives and help people, live longer and live healthier lives. So I thought that was incredible. And Nova, which I've talked about in the past, is subnet number 68, and they have a slightly different use case. So they invent medicines or certain treatments that basically is tied to a certain target protein. So there are proteins that are associated with a lot of different diseases, like I said before, whether it's heart disease, lung cancer, lymphoma, asthma. There's a whole, obviously thousands and thousands of diseases out there, and there's certain proteins that are associated with them that bind into what you make a disease. And what Nova does is it tests these molecules and tries to figure out the combination of these molecules that will bind with these proteins and actually cure and be a medication for it. So, again, these are all simulations with molecules, like a machine learning simulation that is tested and tested and tested. And the cool thing about it is, if it tests really, really well and it's validated and it just keeps getting, great scores, it has a chance to actually go into the lab and be tested as an actual medicine, an actual drug. So, again, this is the drug discovery subnet. It's trying to figure out what type of drugs could solve for certain types of diseases. Whereas with Minos, it's more about understanding the DNA, understanding the genomes, and what potential drugs are needed for, me, you, somebody else with certain DNA strands. And just to go back to, how much these guys are making, I was looking at the monthly pay for the top Nova miner, and this guy made 908 tau. Okay, so that's like maybe like $185,000. Okay, just from figuring out ways to mix molecules to come up with a drug that can solve for certain diseases. And this is just incredible, and it's validated by these machine learning prediction models. So that's the great thing about Bittensor, is that you can test, you can keep doing tests and keep trying to solve for these equations, and it's like unlimited. Like, you don't need to have data from a lab, to test, certain molecules or test certain genomes, right? Like, all that stuff is like super inaccessible, and like it's not, it's not feasible to have all that information, right? So to be able to come up with this synthetic information and to be able to test it, every single day, and have miners compete with one another in trying to figure out these combinations that can solve for diseases, that can figure out a genome and a DNA strand. I just find it really incredible. So, for me, these developments just come to one question only. Is this going to be the platform? Are these going to be the subnets? Are these going to be the projects that ultimately solve for cancer, that helps us understand our DNA makeup that much better? And that is like the holy grail, of like life in general, to be honest with you, because like everybody's looking to live a healthier life. Everybody's looking to try to figure out health problems. Everybody's trying to understand, the human being makeup, because it's just so complex, and it just takes so long just to get like little developments to actually become accomplished. And this is what Bittensor's all about, right? It's studying, it's doing experiments, it's competing against one another, and it's about getting to that state of the art, equation and results that can really make a difference. Whether it's AI agents, whether it's inference, whether it's marketing with Bitcast, whether it's DeFi, and in this case, medical drug discovery, DNA discovery. So I'm just like really pumped. And like I had a video, it was like a few months ago, and everybody was always talking about like, when is Bittensor gonna get that DeepSeek moment, right? And like, if you don't know what that is, DeepSeek is a Chinese model, decentralized model that kind of came out of nowhere for a really low budget and, took the world by storm, right? But like for me, I think it's so much more important to have the deep mind moment, right? And the deep mind moment means that was the company that solved for protein folding, and that was just an incredible discovery that has been like something that people have been trying to solve for dozens of years, and they were able to do it with their model that originally beat like the best, chess players in the world, and just like did some incredible things with chess and a few other things. So, like, I think that we have the subnet owners that have the correct incentive mechanisms, and we have the miners that have the willpower and the skill sets to actually have these amazing achievements and to solve for, certain problems that have been around, for all of our lives, for, hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's what gets me really excited. So, just think about, the next medical discovery could be coming from a Bittensor subnet near you. And, that is something to be really excited about. And if and when something like that does happen, it's going to be pandemonium, because you make some sort of discovery, that cures a certain disease or helps you understand the DNA that much better. That affects the world. It doesn't affect, your town. It doesn't affect the city. It doesn't affect the state, your country. It affects the whole entire world. So, keep an eye on these subnets, Minos, Nova. It could be really interesting how this all comes to light in terms of what they accomplish. So thanks for watching for the first time in a few months, and I'm hoping to do a lot more videos, and I hope you guys are all doing well, and definitely like and subscribe, check out my Twitter, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon. Take care.